everybody. My name is Drew, and I'm a psychotherapist here in New York City. And today we are going to talk about the 3 threes, the deeper dive into the Enneagram, past the numbers, and into the subtypes, the 3 subtypes, the 3 life centers, and the 3 social stances. Now, when you are trying to type yourself, these might help you get a little bit more accurate about who you are. Sometimes the Enneagram number is kind of confusing and you don't know how you fit. Maybe you knew right away, but this will navigate you even deeper into the subterranean regions to figure out in a more nuanced, more in-depth way who you are and how you operate in the world. Now, I've been doing these and I've started branching out to other numbers. And this is a resource I want to just have as I do the other numbers that people can come to as I'm talking about subtypes or social stances or life centers. Now, if you are in the future needing any help and you want either a singular consultation or you want some long-term work or just some short-term work, get in touch with me on my Instagram or on my website. Now, my goal is to help you know your personal accent more. To help you, in a sense, be a psychological mechanic, open up the hood and see how the wires and the tubes and the fluids are all leading to different parts of the car, different parts of who you are, and how does your engine run differently than other people's. So we have to, yes, originally look at our sin or passion. That's the beauty of the Enneagram. It kind of shows us that we have this human striving that guides us in a way, but we're usually being guided in a blind way, with our shadow having too much weight. The shadow is the things behind us that haven't entered into our consciousness fully or at all, or some of the good things that we've put away that we need to pull out because we didn't think that the world would accept them. And so the Enneagram works as a subversive rearranger of our insides, so that we know ourselves better and we can be kinder to ourselves and therefore more free in relationship and in our work and with our families and friends and in our intimacy. The Enneagram does show us, though, the contaminated DNA, the coding that isn't really suiting us or working well. And that sequencing, how we can go in and rearrange it with psycho-biotech, in a sense. When I found the subtypes, and I want to start there, as we try to help you be seen, understood, that when I found the subtypes, it opened up my life to a more deep way of understanding how I was a 4. Now, in a sense, we're not our number, but I had all the characteristics of a 4, and I still do. But there was times when I was talking to other 4s, and we just didn't have the same story, or we didn't have the same way of doing life. And the subtypes get us deeper in. So there is 3 subtypes. It's the self-preserver, the sexual type, or the one-on-one, and the social type. And when I found them, this quote hit me. Now, this quote is by Rainer Maria Rilke, one of the most famous poets ever. And he went and was looking at Cézanne's art. And it moved him so much that he said this: I have behind me so many years that are lost, or at least have almost eluded me, that I am now ruthlessly living towards a certain entrepreneurship. Now, he was fusing with Cézanne's work. And when I found the subtypes, no joke, there was a fusion there for me. I moved towards it because it made sense of how I move in the world more. We have to find ways to decentralize our ego. Our ego gets in the way. The ways we protect ourselves from the world gets in the way of real relationship and real purpose. And so we need a pattern disruption, and that's what the Enneagram offers us. It offers us a pattern disruption. But to further deal with our shadow and where all the stuff hides that is dysfunctional, and also the good stuff that's hiding back there that we are not utilizing well because we don't think the world will accept it. We have to integrate consciously some of that stuff, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's good stuff back there. We have to integrate that too. And I think the subtypes help us do that. It dislocates us from the ways we are protecting ourselves and gives us a little bit of more information about, like, okay, you pull away this way or you move towards people that way. All right, and then you attach that to your number. So we have this passion. And for me as a 4, my passion is envy, or my sin is envy. And it hits this life direction, this way I protect myself. It's an instinct, the subtype. It's an instinct, a life strategy of human behavior for survival. And we learned it pretty early. We usually learned it pretty early. How do I stay alive in my environment? Now, some people have to really stay alive in their environment as kids. But in a sense, it's how do I get love or get appreciated, or how do I stay safe? And today we can use it to find out how we can become more loving. So as I do this intro to the subtypes, I want you to think about how your passion, whether that be envy or sloth or whatever that be, hits up against your subtype and makes you one of 27 different types, not just 9. There's 3 subtypes and 9 numbers. Do that math. We are always all 3. And to self-unfold and to expand, we have to know how these 3 work. So we cannot just be conforming, but confronting these 3 and become more actually unique in the way that we accumulate this information and put it out into the world and blend and become more balanced. This is the type of psychoeducation and scrappy work that psychodetectives do, They use the Enneagram as an ally, and these are the deeper parts of it for the self-unfolding. So you have to follow your responsibility. And the responsibility here is to see how these 3 work. Now, I like to give this image. If you put your hand up in front of your face with your fingers like this, either in an E or a 3, you have a dominant subtype and a repressed subtype. And when we're young, they're pretty split. The gap between the 3 have a broader chasm or valley in that sense. Now, as we get older and we do that psychodetective work and we get educated and our emotions developed, well, what happens is they start to come closer. So in my life, when I was young, the sexual type, the one-on-one type, was pretty loud. And then the self-preserver was a little less loud, but it was involved. And I'm going to go into what these are and how to explain them more. And the social type was repressed. As I've done 20 years of being a therapist and even more work at being a client, I've really dug in and figured out more about myself, and this gap has closed. And it closes and closes, and the fingers start to come together. And as you get in the second half of life, your second 40 years, you might start to do this more, and all of a sudden it looks kind of like a flowy straight line, and you don't know which one's leading and which. This is development. This is health. We are always all 3. I tell people when I'm doing these videos, and especially when I'm doing the subtypes, is watch all 3. If you're a 4, and I just did the 9s, for example, and you're trying to understand who you are better, and you go, oh, I'm a self-preserver, or I'm a sexual type, or I'm a social type, and you just go watch that video, you're doing yourself a disservice by not watching all 3. Now, I don't get paid for these things, so it doesn't serve me for you to watch them. It only serves you to get a more comprehensive look at what you are. The second 2 matter. not just the dominant one. And in fact, the repressed one really matters. The thing that you don't actually utilize for survival that much, you might practice using more to become more whole. So when you're talking to people, listen to what they are saying, and you'll start to figure out what their subtype is. So let me go into the specific subtypes. And when you are talking to people, listen to what they're saying. Do they talk a lot about the things and the individuals they are into? That might be the one-on-one type, like myself, or the sexual type. Do they talk about the routines and the things that keep them sustained? Not the human connection, but the stuff. The food, their survival, the books they need to read, the time they need to be away from others, the safe zone they need to get to, the routines they need to keep. Well, that's the self-preserver. And what about the person who talks a lot about groups? A lot about connecting with groups and causes and things beyond themselves. Those are the social types. So we're going to get into that now. And then we're going to jump into the life centers. Those three. And then we are going to talk about the social stances. And all three of these threes, these 9 different things we're going to talk about, will help you easier find out what type you are, and then give you the tools to broaden and develop and expand, to self-expand, to unfold, so that you are not so self-restricted. It is hard work, though. As I said, it's scrappy. It's not for the faint of heart. And it can give us seizures at times because it's so heavy. So I don't want you to be a solitary person in this work. I want to come alongside of you. So we're going to get into the subtypes more deep right now, and then we'll do those others. And if you need to, and you've already done the subtype work, you can pop to the life centers, or you can pop to the social stances. There will be a fast forward button here. Again, my name is Drew. Thanks for watching, and we're going to go on this journey together. All right, I love this stuff. This is fun. So what we're going to talk about now is the 3 types more specifically. What I want you to think of is 2 things. Imagine there is apocalypse. You've seen a bunch of apocalypse money. I just watched World War Z for like the 4th time yesterday with Brad Pitt. For some reason I get off on that one, I don't know, but I don't mind a good apocalypse movie. And what would you do in an apocalypse? Would you try to gain as much resources as you could to survive? Food, guns, ammunition, water, a bunker. Is that the first thing you would think of? Maybe you'd think of like, who are the 1 or 2, maybe small group of people that I would want to have with me? That we would fight the battle together and survive together and cooperate together. That would be the sexual type. If the first one's a self-preserver, they want the stuff. The second type wants the individuals and the individual things, maybe those bands and the music from those bands and the art that they love, they want to bring. And they're really into specific stuff. It's not as broad. It's like they love what they love. Or do you want the group around you? That's the social type. What's the group you want? Do you want to survive in a group and collaborate with them? The more the merrier, as long as we can work together. That's one way to look at it. So you got those 3. Again, we are all 3. I'm just asking you what you would first gravitate towards. And then second gravitate towards. Now, as someone who's 3, my repressed is social, the big group would probably be last. Now, I have a big group of friends, but because I'm a sexual type, I'm kind of like, I think my friends would say this, a hub of where the spokes are coming in. I am individually friends with all these people, and I've introduced them to each other, and some of them are friends outside of their relationship with me, but a lot are kept cohesively together because of me, because of that one-on-one relationship. I love one-on-one relationships. That social part's repressed. Like those, what I don't know that I'd want the big group during apocalypse first. Let's think about a party. You're going to a party, and what do you think of before you get there? Now, as the sexual or one-on-one type, I'm thinking about who are the individuals I want to talk to. Maybe there's a woman I'd be interested in there. As a single guy, maybe there's somebody that I can lock in with. Maybe there's just interesting people that I could have a conversation with. So when I go into the party, I'm looking around for who's there, who stands out, who seems unique, who would be safe to have a good conversation, or challenging to have a good conversation, or intriguing to have a good conversation with. The second thing I think about, because my second one is self-preserver, is where do I want to sit? What is the temperature in the room? Is there going to be food there? What kind of food? What kind of drinks do they have? Do I have enough energy to come to the party? Do I have enough internal resources? The self-preservers, they think about their body and food and shelter and finances. How much will this party cost me? Do I have to buy a gift? How much gas? Is there, do I have to chip in for food? Security, comfortable, physical safety. They will hoard energy and conserve those resources for the party. If I have the resources and appropriate energy, I will survive. Where that sexual type, first one, places that emphasis on the relationship and in a sense, their legacy even. Now, this is going to sound sexual, but like planting a seed in the relationship and passing the seed on. They think a lot about their legacy. Their experiences could be more intense, that sexual one-on-one type. This is why we call them sexual type, because they are looking for exalted moments. High intensity moments. So sex is like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we like to get down all the time. It means that give me the right partner or the right connection and I will come alive. And we could be a bit more competitive. In fact, the sexual type, when they get hurt, can be a bit more angry first before they feel their sadness. So again, they look for the high octane. So in that party, they want to have those deep conversations where the self-preserver wants to find the right places. Now, as a second self-preserver, when I go to a bar, for example, where am I going to sit? How many people can I see? Can I people watch? Can I sit in a corner? That feels safest. And I get to see the whole group. And it's not as much like who's going to jack me from behind, but some self-preservers have that. But will this corner of the bar feel right? Can my shoulder lean up against the wall right? Can I see the rest of the room? Oh, who's that over there? Now the social type walks into the party. You're going to notice this right away, right? You're talking to a social type. If you're a sexual or a self-preserver, you'll probably know this, especially if you're a one-on-one type, a sexual type. You'll watch the social type and you'll be talking to them, you'll be having a conversation, and you'll see their eyes moving around the room. Like, what's going on there? What's going on there? And you think they're not even in the conversation. They might be sort of in it. But they're also concentrated on what's emitting from the room with all the other humans. They think about community belonging. How do I fit in? What's my social status? What's the relational glue between me and the group? And how do I secure those social bonds to fit in and to feel safe and to do the things that the group can do together? Shared purpose, creating good together. So when they go into that room, they're looking at the broader picture of the dynamics of the group. So you track it with me, right? The social type during an apocalypse is going to want those people around. We could even think about it like art. In the foreground is your dominant. In your background is your repressed. And all that middle ground is your second number. How do I get love? Every one of us, admit it to yourself. This is what the Enneagram does, right? It shows us that we are not perfect. We have these weaknesses. So every type is trying to use these ways to control people and to control their environment for self-protection. Please admit it to yourself. This is what you are doing. You are placing an emphasis on a certain type of way of being so that you can protect yourself. Now, here is the tricky part. I was once told when I did my Enneagram 4 subtypes, I did all three, and they were separate videos. And the self-preservers they were the most views by at least double or triple. It's still my most watched video, even though I'm early into the game here. Now, I always thought it was because the self-preservers are more likely to be at home, probably on the internet, doing work in solitary confinement at times, you know? The social type is probably the least likely to go online and start checking out their subtype. Self-preservers, I would admit, are probably the first of all numbers to go online and check out what their type is and their subtype is. But here's the second part. The self-preserving 4 is the counter type. There's always a counter type for every number. So I just did the Enneagram 9s. The counter type there is the social type. They often type when they take the test differently, or people go, "You're not a 9." Or to the self-preserving 4, "You don't seem like a 4." One of these things is not like the other, and one of these things just doesn't fit in. They seem to be counterphobic. They act against their passion. So the self-preserver, in a sense, acts as a 4 against envy, or as a 9 against sloth. They tend to be more active, and so people think that they are 7s or 3s. And interesting enough, for the 4s, the self-preserving 4s look a lot like 7 3s or 1s. So they often mistype and get confused about what they are. And so a lot of people come to these videos because they are the counter type. And it helps them feel more connected. Because they go, "Oh shit, that's why I wasn't connecting with my number. Because I'm counter-passional. I work against the passion." You know, the Enneagram 4 self-preserver doesn't want to be loud with their pain. Us social types and us sexual types are a bit more overt about when we struggle. But the self-preserving 4 is known as the long sufferer. Weird, right? The Enneagram 9 social type is considered the anchor because they tend to do a lot of hard work. They tend to get a consensus, and they don't look slothful. I like to say that they're like a sloth with a carrot in front of their head. So it seems upside down, but again, you're still all three. This is just your dominant. So what you have to do, let's say you're an Enneagram 9, is integrate more in the self-preserver and the sexual type to get more of that balance. All right. That is the subtypes. I can't emphasize this enough. If you're going to go watch any of my videos or anybody else's videos, watch all three. Understand how to integrate them and use them together to become more blended, balanced, and find equanimity so that they are working together. And then you'll see that actually you look a little bit more well-rounded and like you can touch all the numbers and integrate them in. All right, we are now going to go into the centers of intelligence. So before we even jump into the centers of intelligence, which is going to be relatively brief, I want to add this onto the subtypes because I think this is crucial, and this is a thing I teach with all of my clients, especially in romantic relationships. Now, you might be struggling with your spouse or your partner or your significant other or friends, family members. Here's something to watch out for. I've noticed this throughout the years. I was taught this early on, but it's something that I've seen time and time again in my work with clients is that often some of the best relationships you'll see, the top two are flipped. So if we use me as an example, a relationship that might really work for me, if I'm a sexual, self-preserving social, would be to find a partner that's a self-preserving, sexual, those are flipped, social. The bottom, the repressed one, is often the same. Why? The devaluing of that actually allows these to be more cohesive. They can work on this together, which is enjoyable to them, or can be enjoyable to them. The challenge of both collectively working on developing that part of themselves. But here, they're a good complement. They share strengths and weaknesses, but they're not overly weighted on one side. And that blend allows them to be challenged by each other to work on these two, to develop them. Now, what happens when there's a flip? Like, so let's just say a predominantly social type is with a predominantly self-preserving type, and their opposites are flipped. So this self-preserving type's bottom is social, and this social type's bottom is self-preserving, but they're in a marriage together. It can be explosive, very frustrating, because the gap, the bridge that they have to build is much bigger and requires much more resources, manpower, materials to get there. And sometimes they don't have the strength or bandwidth to do it. Their early dysfunction or the work they have to do in life is too much to bridge that gap. And you see a lot of failed relationships. And even like high schoolers, maybe you or your friends from your youth. This gap didn't mean as much then, but as you grow older, the values are different. And so watch out for that. It's not tried and true every time, but I've seen it happen a lot. And even in my own life, I'd say that the least of my friends are social types. Usually I have friends that are self-preservers than sexual types, or sexual types and self-preservers. It just seems to work a bit better. Okay, so let's get into what I would call the life centers, or the centers of intelligence. And I'm going to jump through this, but I want to focus some energy on the folks who came before the Enneagram was really developed. So Karen Horney, for example, a psychologist who did a lot of work in the 20th century, had these ideas of 3 neurotic solutions: turning towards people, turning away from people, and turning hostile towards people, which we'll get into next. That will look a little bit like the social stances, but she also talked about centers of intelligence: mental, emotional, and sexual. Now you start seeing how these are all blended, and hers were defined a bit different than the Enneagrams. But for the Enneagram, we have the gut folks, or the body folks, the heart folks, or the emotional folks, and the head folks, or the brain folks. This is how we process information, how we take it in. As a heart person, my true identity is built a bit around my image. I'm image oriented. Look, I got rings on, I got tattoos, I did my hair. I've cut my own hair since I was 15 years old. I take great pride in it. I put some good product in there. I love this t-shirt. I was conscious about wearing it. You could see my office. It has a vibe to it. I like image. I like how you are taking in me. And some of my self-esteem is based on that. Now, as I've grown older, it's less and less, but there is that sense of social devotion also, that I'm directed towards people, So us heart people tend to be directed towards people. We've got a social devotion, and that heart equals emotion. We tend to be pretty capable of verbalizing what we are experiencing. We're a bit more verbal. It's true. 2, 3s, and 4s. And that's the numbers there. The 2, 3s, and 4s. They are the heart center. Now we've got the head. It's the 5, 6s, and 7. They need to diffuse fear by observing, planning, learning, and it's very much a 5 thing. But they tend to protect themselves from the outside. They're self-preserving in general. They're withdrawing in general. And they can also have an aversion to moving out into the world. Now, within each group of 3, one tends to be a bit more of a good example of that life center. It's just true. So we're going to go deeper into this. But the gut people, they can turn hostile. They are, here I am, deal with me. They're more body types. What is my physical position in the world? How do I instinctually react to the world based on what my body is experiencing? And they are a little bit more concentrated on comfort and control. Now, you might not relate to this if you are, for example, a 9, you might not consider yourself someone who turns hostile. As an 8, you might say, yes, I am somebody who says, here I am, deal with me. And maybe as a 1, you don't feel that. But this is a broad generalization. Now, to get deeper, let's go into the heart. They have more concentration on subjective feelings. What am I feeling? What's going on inside of me that I can articulate? They experience themselves in reaction to others. That's why we deal with so much shame. Because there's so much concentration on how the world views me, so shame can get very loud. We like some attention from others. Think about 3s, 2s, and 4s. Come on. The 2 wants attention for how much they care for people, and the 3 wants attention for how much ambition and achievement they have, and the 4 for how unique and authentic we are. We can also repress our aggressions behind good works. Think about the 2s, 3s, and 4s, how they do this. What we have to work on is not being noticed. We like to be noticed. The 2 can get really aggressive if they aren't being noticed for how much care they're giving. As a 4, if you aren't noticing me as unique and original, it is frustrating to me. Let's move on to the head. They can isolate, maybe the most so the 5. But definitely the self-preservers in general there can isolate, can pull back. They take a step back in order to see what's going on. And they use their brain. In a sense, the 6 can get stuck, the 5 can get stuck in their head, the 7 can get stuck in their head. And they will all 3 hide feelings in different ways. So if you are a 7, 6, or 5, you have to figure out how you hide your feelings. Their anxiety can be exaggerated. I know a 5 right off the top of my head that, as I was using that example of the subtypes, when coronavirus happened, they had the resources at home, the guns, the food, the bunker, the water for a year, the K rations. They had that stuff. They knew how to hide well. And there was an anxiety. The 6s are fear-based. The 7s don't want to look at their shit, so they just keep on running. They need to be more okay with getting in community. Now the gut folks, okay, you're going to feel things in your body and you're going to instinctually act. But you guys in general say, here I am, deal with me. I would say you tend to be the most, for me, enjoyable to be with because you're the least needy. There's less need for attention, for self or for care. You don't see a lot of 8s, 1s, and 9s ask to be cared for. But they can demand their territory and be direct about it. Or in the sense of a 9, they can be passive aggressive about demanding territory, or just like not call you. They'll take a stand, but it's pretty passive. They're not as overly verbal. Like I ask 8s all the time, how you doing? Better than I was yesterday. Always good, never bad. You know, they don't have a lot of expression for the pain they have or the complicated experiences they're having inside. They'll tell you where they stand, but they have to get more comfortable with their feelings, with reality of what's going on for them. So this was just a brief jump into what we consider the life centers or the centers of intelligence, how we take in information and then how we react. Now we're going to get into the social stances, and for a lot of people who are struggling to figure out what your number is, the subtypes and the life centers can really help. Life centers, I would say the least, because within every life center, there seems to be different ways that each number kind of navigates, but there is this like overriding or underlying maybe sense of a life center or a center of intelligence. But when we get into the social stances, I think that you might resonate a bit with it, and it might help you lock into what kind of number you are even more. Okay, we're going to do that last, and then we will conclude. Thank you still for being with me, and I hope this is helping. All right, let's end with the social stances. The social stances are a really cool way that you could find out a bit more about who you are. And if you are having a tough time typing and trying to figure out what your number is, you can sometimes just zero in on what type of social stance you take in the world. What I mean by that is, how do you posture and position yourself to interact with the outside world? So there's 3 numbers that fit into each category. So this social style suggests that we are looking for how we get what we want. How do we present or posture to get what we want? Now it's interesting with these 3 types. We have the withdrawing type. They pull back, of course. We have the assertive types, or when they are unhealthy, the aggressive types. They move out at the world. And we have the compliant types who move towards people. And they are all 3 representing different time orientations. By that, I mean they have a specific focus and energy towards time, a time continuum. So, for example, who would likely think about the future? Your 3s, your 7s, your 8s. These are the assertive types or the aggressive types. Talk to a 7, 8, or 3 about their 5-year or 10-year plan. They might have something in their head. So this is how they orient their thinking. They aren't thinking a lot about the past, and often they're not connected to the present. They might miss you in conversation, meaning they might not see your emotion or understand your experience of them because they are thinking future. And they might not look at the shit they have that has happened in the past. They might not overly be expressive or contemplative about what did my parents do to me. They just move on. Now, folks who live in the past, well, we have the 4s, that's my number. We have the 9s, and we also have the 5s. So 4, 5s, and 9s. They can get caught up in the past. What did I learn about the past that's going to inform the future? So when they enter into a situation, they might remember everything that's happened in the past to them. And that will inform, both in a good way and a negative way, what they will do in a situation. Now, the present dwellers, this is the 6s, 2s, and 1s, or 1s, 2s, and 6s. These are the compliant types. The compliant types, again, they move at people. They support people. So what do they do really well? They live in the present. They tend to not rush too far ahead. They're action-oriented in the now, the here and now. Also, each type has a thing they repress, okay? So let's just say what they are again. We have the withdrawal types, and this is your 4, 5, and 9s. You have your assertive and aggressive types. This is your 3, 7s, and 8s. And then you have your compliant types, and these are your 1s, 2s, and 6s. Each repress a certain way of dealing with the world. What do they repress? Well, the compliant type represses thinking. They can get muddled and confused in the present. And so they might prioritize others and other people's thinking and in the moment action-oriented stances to the neglect of their own. We have the repressed doers, the people who aren't doing as much. They repress that doing component of them. And that is the withdrawal types, because the withdrawal types are pulling back, trying to figure out what's going on in a situation. So they pull back and ask what, when, where, why, what's going on here? Do I like what's going on here? I need to evaluate. And so the doing, the action-oriented, the just spontaneous action, sometimes they have a difficult time with. They repress doing. Now, who represses feelings? Your 3s, your 7s, and your 8s. Classic, like if you talk to a 3, 7, or 8 and ask them how they're doing, I'm doing good, I'm doing good. They want to move forward. They don't want to focus on pain. They don't want to focus on hardship. And so they tend to really neglect feelings and then neglect the feelings of others. Okay, so that just orients us. Let's get deeper in here. What I'm going to do is talk about these 3 different types, and then I'm going to go into each number and what that person struggles with and what they can work on. And then we'll close out. So the withdrawal types. I'm one of these types. I'm a 4, and so I am someone who is going to pull back and kind of see what's going on, and I'm evaluating a room very quickly. And it is a priority for me to evaluate. So the 4, 5s, and 9s, they pull back to evaluate. And they ask themselves the question, am I into this? Like, am I into what's going on? Do I like what I'm seeing here? They move, they don't move necessarily with people because they are pulling back. They don't move with people like a compliant type would. They don't naturally let somebody else lead. They want to pull back and see how they're going to handle a situation. They don't push against like the assertive types though. They pull back and look where the assertive types might just evaluate and move on real quickly. 5s can tend to be emotionally distant. 9s can be physically distant, present, but physically present, but emotionally distant or mentally distant. And the 4s can pull back because they want to create a special and authentic and original thing. So they have to do a lot of tinkering back there to then bring that to the world. Okay, all 3 struggle with practicalities. The practicalities of life. 9s can be daydreamers. 4s can be fantasizers. 5s can be catastrophizers. So the doing is repressed because we're up in our heads, in a sense, thinking about possibly either what I want to become, like the 4s, or blacking out a little bit and just kind of going off into space like the 9s, or what can go wrong here? What can go wrong here? Like the 5s, like they are looking at all of the contingencies. And they're highlighting everything that can go wrong, and they're trying to get the best price, and they're doing all the exploration. So they have to take time to act and be deliberate. Yes, we need to process, but then we need to be productive with that process. So the doing can't constantly be over explored. They can also isolate for protection. Now, this is good and bad, but you have to evaluate how much you isolate for protection. And if others are moving too fast for you, you can either talk to the group about that fact that they're moving too fast. You might be overwhelmed by it, but you might try to slow the pace so that you can get your head around what's going on. How about the assertive types? So the assertive types, the 3, 7s, and 8s. They're planners, but they can be blinded to opportunity. What do I mean by this? Well, when you're planning so far in the future, things that are just around you in the moment can be lost to you. Emotions can be lost to you. The feelings of others. So plenty of 3, 7s, and 8s will get told years later, you moved too quick. And they had team members or family members, friends, loved ones, lovers that felt overwhelmed by them. And not just overwhelmed, they pulled back. And the 3, 7s, and 8s didn't see it. They were too assertive or too aggressive. So they weren't aware of what was going on around them. They can be unrelenting towards their goals. So you don't want to trifle with them too much. So you have to find, as a person in relationship with them, how to communicate that they aren't seeing the trees because they see the forest. They have difficulty accepting reality. Think about this, 3, 7s, and 8s. 3s, you just want to charge ahead. 7s, you want to go do the thing that is going to get you to not think about the pain in life. And 8s, your intensity or your confrontation, you're challenging the world is often so you don't have to look at some of the stuff inside of you. You'll often just reframe a thing, just change how it looks in your head to make it okay. When other people, especially with drawing types like myself, are going to say like, you're just avoiding reality. You're not seeing what's here. They reframe, they're results oriented. They move against others at times. They challenge others to get results. They stay active and busy too often avoid, like I was saying. They can take up a lot of space. So when a person like this walks into a room, like think about, if you're in relationship with them, how much space they take up emotionally. And if you are that type, think about how much space you're taking up. Sometimes you have to. Sometimes it's the best thing. But sometimes you're taking up too much space and crowding it. And your frustration is easily triggered because of it. All right, compliant types are a little bit more tricky, I've found. They'll move with you, not against you. And they have this strong need to be needed. And you can often get a bite from them if you don't value that, especially 2s. If you do not value the work a 2 is doing for you, because they will prioritize you, they're caregivers, they're helpers. If you don't value that or affirm them for it, you can get bitten by them. They can disregard their own needs and wants, though, for others. They are keyed into what people want, for the good and bad. They can take care of people who will never get help, will never get healthy. So they spend a lifetime being compliant to another person's dysfunction. They have a difficulty evaluating themselves because they're so oriented towards others. So in the present, they can lose themselves in the relationship with others. That's why their thinking is repressed, because they are so concerned about the other person that they lose the ability to be rational and logical in a moment. And they can feel flooded when there's a lot of voices around and confused. What's immediately in front of me is the question. They are present oriented. They often need authorities to guide them too. So you'll see that they can get wooed by powerful people. They can get wooed by those 3s, 7s, and 8s for sure. I am to them, that idea of who am I? Well, I am connected to them. Who are they? These other people. And they can be crushed by the priorities of others. They may buy into, more than the other numbers, the way they grew up. Think about it, 2s, 6s, 1s. How much deference you give to your family, your parents, for example, and how they brought you up. You might know it was pretty dysfunctional, but you still have a difficult time taking them off the pedestal or keeping them responsible for what they've done. All right, let me get into each number. I know we're going long here, but let me get into each number. We have the, we'll start with the assertive types. The achiever, the 3. They're aggressive, but they're not putting enough weight on feelings and relationships. And so what do they need to do? They need to have time and space in their own life to value feelings and to value the feelings of others. So with all of these, I'm just going to give you a part that's struggling and a part you can work on, because I always want to challenge you to work on yours. As 7s can be aggressive towards their indulgences, towards their ideas, their interests, their instincts, regardless of the outcome at times, regardless to how they are going to influence others and themselves, how these things that they move towards are going to affect the lives of themselves and others. What can they do? They can be more objective with what's going on in a moment. How will this affect me? How will this affect others? How about the 8s, the challengers? They have an aggressive posture towards protecting others and themselves and their ideas. They challenge. What they need to do to complement this or to offset this at times from it being too extreme is share their vulnerability. Accept their vulnerability. Say to a friend, like, yeah, actually, I am having a shitty week. It's not all good. That can be a big step for you. How about the withdrawing type? Let's start with the 4s with my number. We can withdraw by overindulging our feelings, overindulging our fantasies, and overindulging our idea that we must become this great, complex, interesting, authentic person. We spend a lot of time up here and here withdrawing from the world to do that. What we have to do is become more objective about our needs and our capacity, our limitations. We live so much in fantasy that we aren't seeing that there's steps to get there, even if we were ever to get that fantasy met. And ultimately, it might just be a fantasy that we don't have the capability of getting towards. How about us 5s, the investigators? They withdraw by gathering info and intellectualizing it and collecting as much content as they can so that they protect themselves. If I know everything, that nobody can poke holes in me. What they can do is engage life more from outside their head, from outside the area of expertise, not be so protected and so preparatory in how they deal with life. So maybe be more spontaneous, maybe like go with the flow sometimes, jump in at the deep end, not knowing how deep it is. How about you nines, you peacemakers? You can withdraw by prioritizing peace so much, by prioritizing harmony and like a placid lake. And how you can grow is engaging your feelings more and engaging conflict more, being willing to push back on folks. Okay, how about the compliant types? Let's start with ones. They can be dependent. So the compliant types can also, we might say that they're dependent types. They're dependent by comparing everything that they say and do to some standards, some social expectation. It can be really hard on themselves. And what you guys can do is take the time and space for self-compassion, for kindness to self. It's a really strong way that you can ease the pain of being so harsh to self. How about you twos, you caregivers? You can be dependent by making emotions of others, the thoughts and actions of others, your priority. What can you do? It's obvious, right? You have to prioritize your emotions, actions. Take space to find yourself worthy and to find yourself valuable so you can prioritize you. And we'll end with the sixes. They can be dependent on getting information from the outside. They can be really dependent on people to lead forward into the journey, to take the driver's seat. So they have to make time in their life to notice their own feelings and thoughts. What am I thinking in this moment? What do I want to do? What do I think is the best next step? All right. Guys, I just want to conclude with this. I know this was a deep dive. This last part was 20 minutes long, but the social stances are really important. And those centers of intelligence, they give us this guide along with the subtypes of how to get deeper into our knowledge of how the Enneagram can cooperate to make us a more well-rounded human. So we're not just our number. We are deep and wide and high and long. And so if you've enjoyed this, please subscribe. And again, my name is Drew. If you want to connect with me at all, do so. And if you need to do some individual work with a short-term, long-term, or even like an individual one-time session, get in touch with me on my Instagram, my website. As always, I say at the end of all of these, in the words of Rainer Marie Rilke, everything is yet to be done. Everything. Thanks for being with me, guys, on this deep dive. Have a good one.